We have 11 games on the NBA slate tonight. We have a panel here to talk about it. DraftKings Contributor Garion Thorne, Rotowire's Nick Whalen. This is NBA building blocks, dude. You know the drill. Favorite DFS plays at the following positions for tonight's NBA menu. So who are you going to build around at center, Gare Bear?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great centers. There's also a lot of injuries that we have to watch out for on the top of this pricing list. I guess I'll play it safe in that way and just say Jonas Valanciunas. I think he's a little underpriced. I've kind of gotten used to just seeing Valanciunas above 9K. He's down to 8-7 on this slate going up against the Oklahoma City Thunder, who so far this season, per 100 possessions, have been giving up the most opponent rebounds per game by a pretty wide margin. They're up over 49 opponent rebounds per 100 possessions. Valanciunas, one of just 6 players in the NBA with a total rebounding rate above 20%. I just think he could dominate the glass in this game. The last time he played Oklahoma City, 25 points, 15 rebounds, 53 DraftKings points. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar tonight.
All right, Nick, who you want? Big, beefy 5 spot.
Yeah, I like the Valanciunas call. Obviously, we have Jokic, you got AD, you have Karl Towns, but I like Sabonis at 9,500 going up against the Milwaukee Bucks tonight. If you look at his game log, he had a terrible outing last time Indiana faced the Milwaukee Bucks, but obviously no Giannis in the lineup tonight, and I would be surprised if Chris Middleton plays in this game with a hyperextended knee. So you're not really getting the full version of the Milwaukee Bucks, and obviously we're most concerned about that Giannis matchup for Sabonis. Giannis just terrorized him last time they met. So you take him out of the picture, and all of a sudden it's DeMarcus Cousins and it's Bobby Portis guarding Sabonis instead of a defensive player of the year. So, you look at Sabonis' last few games, he's been at or around 50 DraftKings points in each of his last 4. He's got double-digit rebounds in 12 straight. That gives him such a high floor when it comes to DFS. Even if he's not having a great scoring night, even if the assists aren't there, not a guy who you really rely on for great defensive stats, but he's pretty much always going to get you like 10 to 15 rebounds. So I really like his floor tonight. I'd actually like his upside at this price against the diminished Bucks outfit.
All right, Nick, take me to forward. Who's a guy who is worth building your lineup around at this position?
Yeah, so with so many games on the slate, obviously you have plenty of options. I don't actually mind if you want to pay up. Maybe pair Sabonis with Anthony Davis, assuming he plays at 10,400. It feels like he's catching a lot of flack for the Lakers' struggles early on, and maybe part of that is warranted. Obviously, the shooting has been an issue for him. But I actually think he's played pretty well. And I think he's been like the one guy who you could rely on defensively for this team. And that's borne out, when you look at his steals and especially his blocks numbers this season. His rebounding is up as well. So I think assuming if he plays in this game, I do like Anthony Davis at 10-4. Brandon Ingram at 9,200 as well is a name that jumped out to me. He gets a matchup against OKC. Obviously, that is an advantageous one. 50-plus DraftKings points in 3 of his last 5 games. He's really starting to assert himself since he returned from injury a few weeks ago. And then one more name that I'll throw out quickly, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Aaron Gordon, 6,200, quietly having a really, really nice bounce-back season in Denver. And he goes up against Minnesota tonight, the worst rebounding team in the league. They've been that team essentially wire to wire so far. So I think that helps him, give him a pretty decent floor in that matchup tonight.
Gary, and no Greek freak. He's in COVID protocol. Could it be a LeBron night?
I mean, it could be. You got to think Dallas, they've been pretty susceptible to interior players so far this season. I think LeBron could definitely be in for a good night. I mean, Davis might also not play. He's questionable. There's a lot of guys out for the Lakers tonight. So I could see it being LeBron night. I'm going to go a little bit cheaper, though. Jae'Sean Tate is an that I'm really interested tonight at $5,800. It's always such a chore to try to remember what exactly the rotations are for the Rockets at this particular moment. But tonight, no Eric Gordon. Christian Wood is questionable. I would be surprised if he plays. And if those two guys are out so far this season, it's not the biggest sample in the world, but Jae'Sean Tate is averaging over 1.3 DraftKings points per minute when those two guys and Jalen Green have been off the court so far in 2021-22. He's just someone who you often forget about, but he's been a very productive DFS asset for about the last 2 seasons. Cleveland's not the best possible matchup you could draw, but if Evan Mobley isn't going to play in this game, and he is also questionable, everyone's questionable tonight. Cleveland's defense obviously suffers a little bit if they're missing their super rookie. So, keep an eye on the status of Mobley, keep an eye on the status of Wood. But I think regardless of how those things fall, Tate's actually a pretty good value.
All right, Garion, hook me up with a guard who has that building block potential here. Looks like Trae Young's going to be the highest priced guy.
Yeah. I would say this will be the chalk, but I just think you kind of have to invest. I'm a little bit worried if Middleton doesn't play and this gets into just ridiculous script territory, but I trust the Bucks to keep this game close. So Drew Holiday at $7,500. I mean, his numbers, the differential between his numbers with Giannis on and off the court is really just incredible stuff. It makes sense. Don't get me wrong, but he goes from a 23% usage player to a 31% usage player this season when Giannis is not playing. Again, I would almost prefer if Middleton was on the court. I don't want this to be just Drew Holiday, although that's also fine. But at this price point, considering how productive he's been this season without Giannis on the floor, 1.22 DraftKings points per minute, you'd have to expect he's playing somewhere between 32 to 38 minutes tonight. It just really, it's hard to see how Drew Holiday doesn't bring back value here.
All right, Nick, what direction do you want to go in here at guard?
Yeah, I love the Holiday call. I actually had him listed as one of my values. I mean, at 7,500, I think given the circumstances, you could make a case that he belongs in that territory. But he's a great play at that price, especially if Middleton doesn't play. I mean, Trae Young against Orlando, obviously that's going to be a popular one. 10,700 is his salary. That's the second best offense going up against the second worst defense in the league. So pretty obvious matchup advantage there. You know, I always find myself coming back to DeJounte Murray these last few weeks on DraftKings. He's at 10,300, so the price is up, but going up against the Hornets team, that's still going to be a little bit shorthanded. No LaMelo Ball as he works on his conditioning. Charlotte's still the worst defense in the league, right near the top of the league in pace. You know, they've been able to keep a lot of games close, but it feels like they're constantly playing games in like the high 120s or even the 130s. So that's always a matchup that you want to seek out. And then I also like SGA, 8,800 against New Orleans. If you want to pivot away from Trae Young or DeJounte Murray and save a little bit of cash, I think this is a really good spot for him on the other side of that matchup with Brandon Ingram, who I mentioned earlier. I think both of these teams are kind of matchups that you want to target, and they happen to be facing each other.
All right, well, Nick, you just mentioned like you had some value guys drawn up for us. Is there someone you could build around actually in the value department?
Well, yeah, I mean, Holiday at 7,500. Obviously, I think you're getting a player who has like, you know, 5-figure potential depending on what goes on with the Bucks lineup tonight. But I think you could look at Pat Connaughton at 5,000. I think you can look at Grayson Allen a little cheaper at 4,000. Grayson Allen has cooled off a little bit over these last few weeks, but he's still been a high minute guy for them. I mean, you're losing like a 30% usage rate player in Giannis. You're potentially down Chris Middleton as well. And the Bucks were supposed to get Dante DiVincenzo back tonight, and of course he lands on the COVID list. So, you know, we might have been looking at a situation where Connaughton and Allen see, you know, somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes shaved off of their workloads, and now that's not going to happen. So I think both of those guys now become interesting values. If you want to look away from Milwaukee, I would keep an eye on Anthony Simons at 5,400. I know he was bad last night against Phoenix, but he's basically locked into 30-plus minutes, it looks like, with CJ McCollum sidelined. I don't know that I'll be locking him in, but if Damian Lillard were to be rested tonight, you know, playing into overtime with that abdominal injury on the second night of a back-to-back, then to me, Simons at 5,400 becomes really interesting. And then the last name I'll throw out there is Garrison Matthews at 4,700 for Houston. As Garion alluded to, no Jalen Green, no Kevin Porter, no Eric Gordon, no Daniel House, no John Wall. Good chance no Christian Wood tonight. So the Rockets could kind of be in that same situation as Milwaukee, where you have 3 or 4 guys you're maybe parsing through for value.
Garion, help me out in the value department.
Yeah, I mean, if recent history is any indication, aka the last 48 hours, we'll probably have like 2 teams we're not even looking at have massive outbreaks sometime in the next, 6 hours. So this conversation will look vastly different in just a little bit. But going on who's actually already had their outbreaks, I think, like Nick said, you got to look at the Bucks. Obviously, the Rockets are going to have a ton of value tonight. We've already mentioned a couple of those guys. The Lakers are also really hard pressed. And I think a lot of the Lakers' viability comes down to whether or not Anthony Davis plays. He's obviously missed the last 2 games. He's questionable for this game tonight. If the Lakers feel like they do want to take it very safe with one of their superstars, we could be entering DeAndre Jordan territory, which I know is a scary place to be, but no Dwight Howard in this contest. He's $3,100. The last time DeAndre Jordan has had to play 20 minutes in a game, he's done it 4 times in the past 5 weeks. He's averaged 22 DraftKings points. So again, this isn't one of those like, oh my God, DeAndre Jordan's going to break the slate, but if he ends up starting this game out of necessity at $3,100, there's a very good chance he's just going to return 6 or 7x value. And it's hard to ignore at that particular price point. But there's going to be a lot of value that opens up on this slate. And I think, as Nick was alluding to earlier, this might be one of those slates where you want to take 2 extremely high-priced players because you're going to be able to build around that kind of lineup.
Garion, let's wrap up this segment here by switching things to the DK Sportsbook and getting your favorite bet tonight. What do you got?
I'm going to go Jalen Brunson over 16.5 points. He's done this 6 of his 8 starts. He's going to start again tonight with Luka Doncic out. He's averaging almost 20 points per game and a 27% usage rate when he has started so far this season. The Lakers defense really could be in shambles depending on who's actually in the rotation tonight, especially if DeAndre Jordan is playing center, as I alluded to before. So I just think Brunson goes over 16.5 points.
Nick, hook me up, dude. Favorite bet on this 11-game NBA slate?
If Evan Mobley plays through that hip injury, I like the Cavs to cover 9.5, which is a big number against Houston. But Houston, as we know, not a good team, and without some of their key players tonight. And somehow here we are near the end of December, and the Cleveland Cavaliers are the best spread covering team in the league by a mile. They are 22-5-2 ATS on the season, covering at almost an 82% clip. That's like 16 percentage points better than any team in the league. So when Evan Mobley is in that lineup and that defense is clicking, I think this is a great matchup for them to try to shut down that very shaky Houston Rockets offense. So if Mobley plays, lock in Cavs 9.5.